You're listening to the Good Question Podcast with Richard Jacobs. Our goal is to make each of our guests exclaim, that's a good question. I don't know the answer. Because when that happens, it means you, the listener, may be inspired to learn more beyond the interview and to ask great questions yourself that lead to new insights. In this podcast, we cover historical and current anthropology, comparative religion, and history. Welcome, and let's get started.
Hello, this is Richard Jacobs with the Good Question Podcast. I've got a really great guest, marketer Allan Dib. He's an expert in marketing, author of Lean Marketing, and a famous book he did a few years ago was the One-Page Marketing Plan. So we're going to talk about his approach, what it looks like, and we'll go from there. So welcome, Allan. Thanks for coming.
Richard, pleasure to be on.
Yeah, let's start a bit with your background. You know, a lot of marketers try, but they don't really get to any significant position within any industry. But it looks like you're having great success. So what got you into marketing in the first place?
Necessity, really. In my first business, where I was an IT geek and trying to get clients for my business, and I struggled. I had no idea. I had kind of a technical sort of brain. I could do all the stuff technically. I was really good at what I did, but I had no idea how to get clients. So it was one of those things where really out of necessity, I had to figure out, how do I get clients in a reliable way that I can follow consistently? And it seemed at the time like marketing was this black art that only certain very creative people could do. And me being kind of my engineering brain, that was something I really struggled with. So I really needed to figure out, how do I crack this marketing problem? So it was really out of necessity, and I spent probably 10 years studying all the greats, Dan Kennedy included, Seth Godin, everybody, and I got little bits of value from each, but I felt like there was nothing that really took me from zero to understanding marketing at a very deep level.
It's weird. You know, in every industry I've ever seen, there'll be people that are starving to death, and right down the street, sometimes right next door, they're flourishing, they're doing amazing. And I always wonder, the people that are starving to death are looking at the ones that are flourishing and, I don't know, not wondering, how do they do it? Why are they so successful? Or maybe they're just caught up in envy and jealousy. And, you know, what have you seen in the various industries you worked with? Was my assessment accurate, or like, what do you see?
Your assessment is 100% accurate, and it's a source of great frustration, especially, you know, when you're doing things really well technically and you're good at what you do, and you see other people who are inferior technically, who are inferior, have an inferior product or service. It's incredibly frustrating. And you know, I often say one of the most frustrating things in life is when dumber people make more money than you. And to me, that was incredibly frustrating to see competitors who, you know, were even hiring us to train them on the latest technology do better than us financially. So it's very much the case that you can have two businesses in the same market offering the same or very similar products and them have very different financial results. And to me, I couldn't sleep till I figured out, what was the difference? What was the difference between the guy who was struggling and the guy who was doing really well, selling the same product or same service to the same market? And over, the answer kept coming back to marketing.
What were some of your early marketing attempts that worked, that made you feel like, yes, this is possible, I'm going to keep going?
So the first business was kind of in the early days of Google Ads and AdWords and things like that. So my early sort of attempts were pretty difficult because I could see almost immediately what worked, what didn't work. We could run ads and spend a lot of money and get nothing out of it. And then we would change something on the landing page or copy. We were also in the early days of SEO, so we were able to see the power of content. So if we created relevant content to our market that created organic traffic, and it felt like magic at the time. It's like, hey, I can write about my area of expertise or my topics and all of that, and people on the internet all over the world find me. So that was really, really cool. So there's some of our early attempts, and I would say that the vast majority of things that we tried didn't work, but it was a really good training ground where I could figure out, well, what does work, what really does move the needle. And that's where I started to see the power of words and the power of copy and copywriting, and seeing, hey, what really moves the needle from a marketing perspective. And I saw the power of using the right words to motivate people. So, you know, simple things that we as marketers would take for granted, like writing headlines that have an emotional kind of element, having calls to action, talking about the problem rather than talking about ourselves, because the natural tendency is for us to talk about ourselves and how awesome we are and all of that sort of thing. And of course, that's what I did, and it didn't work. So I had to take a very different approach. So really rethinking my whole approach to marketing, and a lot of it is counterintuitive because you think, hey, talking about myself and how awesome I am will attract people. You think about widening the net and making your service attractive to everyone rather than a specific target market or a specific niche. These are all things that are kind of counterintuitive that you learn, hey, actually, that's not how marketing actually works.
So we'll fast forward in a minute to your current consulting and the excuses that you hear, the self-defeating excuses from people. But before that, what are some of the first things that, again, worked, that maybe surprised you or delighted you, that started to give you traction and say, wow, I really can make this stuff work, and embolden you? What were maybe an example or two?
So the first really pieces of success that I had were clients coming through that I didn't know, because a lot of early clients were from, family, friends, referrals, all of that. And it almost felt miraculous to get somebody who didn't know us before, right? Who just came through as a lead over the internet, who we got to talking to, and who we took through the conversion process. So those first few clients who really came through from not friends, from not family, not referral, not somebody who knew us, that felt really miraculous. Like, oh, wow, this is actually working. We're starting to get some early results. And, it was a very slow burn. It wasn't like we immediately had a flood of clients. It wasn't like one of those rags to riches success stories, but it was like, okay, well, this is possible. Like, it felt like now this is actually possible rather than it being something that was theoretically possible.
What did you do did it ever turn into a flood where you're like, wow, I can't keep them away?
It did eventually turn into a flood, but it took a long time because at every stage there's some bottleneck. So there's something that is either not working. So for example, maybe people are not clicking on the ad. Maybe people are not opting in. Maybe they're not responding to our message. Maybe our follow-up system isn't working. So sometimes we'd get them on a call and we just couldn't convert them. So at every stage we found some bottleneck, some roadblock, some whatever. And so it did take literally years for it to turn into a flood. And we ended up growing that business very significantly. We grew to be a national business. We ended up selling it for more money than I'd ever seen in my life. And so that was a really, really cool experience. But yeah, it did take many years. And so when I started consulting, a lot of what was at the top of mind for me was, how do I shortcut this process for my clients so they don't have to spend years, so they don't have to, years and years of trial and error. And for me, trial and error was mostly error. I wanted to see how I could reduce that time to getting results for my clients.
So what do you see holds people back? A typical business owner, they're going to struggle at first. Maybe they will try marketing. Maybe they'll just have it done for them, or they'll get into it themselves. But, a lot of businesses fail, a majority of them. So what do you think is happening in the mind of a business owner as they're going through this process?
The key problem I see is a lot of what I mentioned that I struggled with, because it feels intuitive to kind of widen the net. It feels intuitive like, hey, if we offer a wider variety of products and services to a wider variety of market, we'll get more revenue. And that's rarely ever the case. What we want to do is we want people to see your message, see what you're doing from a marketing perspective and say, hey, that's for me. And that won't happen if you have a very general message. If you're like all things to all people, hey, we do everything for everyone, no one's ever going to say, hey, that's for me. And so as counterintuitive as it feels, you need to have a very defined niche. You need to select your target market very, very tightly, and then have an offer that's very compelling for them. And again, I kind of liken it to, if you looked at your Google search history, it's probably very specific. You're not typing in car or doctor. You're typing in knee specialist and the area that you live in, or you're typing in Porsche 911 and then looking for some part or some feature or whatever, right? So you're not typing in just general stuff. Your target market is exactly the same. They're typing in something very, very specific into that Google search engine. So that's something that you want to be very aware of. What is your target market searching for? It's not going to be something general. So you want someone to find you and connect with you and connect with your message, and it be something that they actually want and that they actually really desire, and that when they read your message, it's compelling and they say, hey, that's for me. And that's never going to happen if you have just a very general offer to a general audience.
Yeah, and I hear from a lot of people, I want my clients to think this or to do this, but they don't seem to ask clients, what do you want? So they put out marketing messages that are either generic or what they want, but they don't seem to ask what, again, clients want.
Yeah, totally. So very much you need to be thinking about tapping into demand rather than trying to create demand. So a lot of people have this notion of, hey, we're going to create demand. We're going to tell people what they want and all of that sort of thing. That pretty much never works. What you want to be is to be tapping into demand. So how do we figure out what our people want and then give them what they want? So that's very, very key.
Any insights into the process of how people can figure out what their customers want, like who their customer avatar is?
So a couple of ways. So depends what category you fall into. So if you've been one of your customers before, meaning you've been in the situation, for example, myself, I used to be someone who didn't know anything about marketing, who was frustrated, who had a business and I just didn't know how to get clients and revenue in the door. So I've been that person. I've been in the trenches. So I know how it feels. I know what the struggles are. I know what the psychology is. And so I can speak to that target market. So that's a very, very powerful way. If you've been in the situation where you've had that struggle and you've overcome it, you can talk in a very authoritative way. You can really tap into what the feelings are because you've felt them before. In the situation where you haven't been part of your target market, so let's say you're just trying to exploit a new opportunity or you see a gap in the market or whatever else, I would definitely talk to people in that industry. But more than that is a hack that I've used that has been just incredible is to attend an industry conference. For example, I've been to IT industry conferences, pharmacy industry conferences, plastic surgery conferences, and just by spending a day at that conference, I learned more than if I would have spent 6 months or 12 months doing research online, because they bring in all the keynote speakers that are the who's who of the industry. They have panel discussions about the hot topics that are going on in the industry, the biggest problems, the biggest desires, all of those sorts of things. So just by spending a day or half a day at that conference, I now know what the fears, what the hopes, what the desires are of people in that industry. And so I can talk to that. So I found that to be one of the best hacks to figure out an industry or a target market that I don't know well already. And especially between the sessions, being able to chat one-on-one with some of the attendees, ask them about their business, ask them about some of their struggles, because they're there to talk about what's top of mind for them. And usually that's either a problem or opportunity that they're trying to capitalize on. So I found that incredibly valuable. Then on top of that, you can do the usual sort of online research of online communities, Facebook groups, Reddit, subreddits, and so on and so forth. But attending an industry conference, you will absorb more in a day or half a day than you will in months of online research.
Anything you remember from attending a conference that really surprised you, either in a positive or negative way?
Absolutely. I mean, there are, industry-specific things that they're concerned about. So, for example, I attended the pharmacy industry conference and they were all freaking out about the online discount pharmacies. I think they were really concerned about Amazon getting in on the fulfillment of medicine and all of that online. And, Amazon are happy to run at a very, very thin margin or even at a loss. I think Mark Cuban had some kind of discount fulfillment service for medicine as well. So that was stuff that they were all really concerned about. And then they were looking at additional places where they could get revenue, and they were looking at supplements and things like that. So these are things that I'd have never known unless I had attended that conference. And, speakers were talking about medicinal cannabis and all of those sorts of things. So they were opportunities that they saw coming up in terms of CBD oils and all of those sorts of things. So again, I could have done online research, probably would have found some of those things, but it would have taken me a long time. But I would manage to absorb all of that just sitting in an audience and learning something about an industry that I know nothing before that.
So when your marketing messages started working, what was that like? You ran a campaign, what happened before, and then what happened after you finally found the way to crack the code? What did you experience initially?
Well, experience euphoria, of course, and I was very, very proud of being able to get clients, like I said, that I didn't know before, that didn't come through referral or through friends and family. And it felt like I had kind of tapped into a money machine, right? It's like you've now got a machine that prints money, even though it was, like I said, a pretty slow burn and not an immediate flood of money. It was like, hey, this is actually possible. I can actually get people who don't know me to start knowing me, trusting me, liking me enough to buy from me. And like I said, definitely encountered obstacles along the way, definitely had things that were, I needed to fix. Like, for example, attracting a lead is one step. That's great. Someone calls your office or opts in on your website, but that's very much different than someone actually buying from you. So it took a long time to kind of figure out every step of the funnel, and it was something that took a long time to really get going, but that was really, really powerful, because when you know how to get a client at will and reliably and know how to do that, that changes everything.
So when you work with clients, I referred to this earlier, but what do you hear from them that frustrates you, that tells you that their thinking is not yet aligned with what they need to think in order to work with you properly? Again, what do you hear them say? And you're like, no, you have to do it this way instead. And here's why.
Yeah, look, I don't get particularly frustrated with clients, but I think common mindset roadblocks include, hey, we've got to widen the net. We've got to add more products, add more services. We've got to target everyone. Also, another mindset shift often is, look, advertising or marketing doesn't work in my industry. It's a relationship type of business. And, often I need to have a conversation with clients around, hey, well, is there anyone else in your industry who marketing and advertising is working for? And when they think about it, well, pretty much always there is. So often it's just a matter of kind of logically going through and taking a client through the whole process. Because just like me, I was at one stage where I thought all of those things, and because it is counterintuitive. It does feel like if you widen the net, you'll get more clients. It does feel like you need to target everyone, especially when your product or service is usable and is valuable to a wide variety of people. So it's not necessarily a frustration that I have with clients, but it's just a journey that we need to take. And often, like I said, because I've been there before, I've been in that mindset, I've been in the trenches, so I totally understand where they're coming from. So it's just a matter of taking them through that journey and getting them to really see and understand that we need to be very specific. We need to have a message that attracts an audience. We need to have someone say, hey, that's for me. So that's a large part of the process with a lot of clients. Some clients already understand that. They're more dialed in. So we work with people who know nothing about marketing, which is where I once was, to sometimes they've got good traction, but they just want to get a better result.
When you tell people not to widen the net, do they get afraid that they'll run out of customers, or what are their fears?
Yeah, totally. A lot are fearful about, well, are we going to turn people away and all of that sort of thing? So are we going to lose revenue? Are we going to be less attractive to wider variety of people? And so the answer to that is, well, if someone comes your way and they're not in your specific target market, well, you've got the option of taking that business on or not. But we have limited money, we have limited budget, we have limited time, we have limited energy. So who are we going to actively go after? So I think of it like we've got arrows that we're going to use to hunt for our target market, right? So we want to be very, very targeted. And if something comes your way and you want to take it on, well, that's no problem. But who are we going to actively go after in our advertising, in our marketing, in our outreach, in our messaging, all of that? So that's where we want to be very specific, because we've got limited time, limited budget, limited energy. So I call that limited firepower, right? Every business, no matter how big or small, you've got a certain amount of firepower. And if you're not a huge, massive conglomerate, well, it's usually pretty limited. So we want to be very, very targeted and specific about how we use that.
What about branding versus direct response? Do you have some clients that think they have to do branding and other ones that are like, no, I want to do direct response? Like, what do you do there?
Clients usually pretty open. Clients really normally just want more revenue and more business. And so back in the day, if you'd asked me a few years ago, I would have said, yep, it's all about direct response. I was very much similar to Dan Kennedy's thinking. But over the years, I've seen that building a brand, building a personal brand is a very efficient way to turn prospects into clients and create a lot of goodwill in the marketplace. It's very, very efficient. With pure direct response marketing, feels like a lot of it is just a numbers game. We're burning a lot of clients who may be not interested right now, but might be interested down the track. So I like to take a dual approach where we're using the principles of direct response marketing, but we're also building a great brand and we're creating a lot of goodwill in the marketplace, because goodwill is what will turn into the business being valuable down the track. It's what will turn into new clients, new revenue.
What about cultivating referrals and reviews and testimonials and things like that? Do you provide help to the business once they start getting more clients and, get those things in place?
Yeah, of course. I think that's social proof is a very, very powerful conversion tool. It's a very, very powerful attraction tool. So if you see other people have got the results that you've gotten and saying, hey, this person was lost, they implemented our methods or the way that we do things, and now they're found. That's a very, very powerful story.
So what kinds of clients and what kinds of industries do you prefer to work with?
We work with clients generally who are in the $1 to $20 million revenue range. We work a lot with kind of what I call normal, ordinary businesses. So we work with construction companies, medical businesses. We work with people in finance and consulting. So these are people who usually are really, really good technicians, but they're never had any exposure to learning marketing and implementing marketing in their business. So a lot of times just implementing some of our direct response and branding strategies is a real game changer for them, because now for the first time they've kind of got a marketing mindset, a marketing tools, assets and processes, and that's really, really powerful for them.
So how do people get in touch? One or more of your books?
My books, the One-Page Marketing Plan and Lean Marketing, and they can be found wherever books are sold. My books are very popular on audiobook, so audible.com, find the One-Page Marketing Plan and Lean Marketing.
Okay. And then before clients come to you, should they read one or both of your books? Like, what's your recommendation to prepare?
Either or. You can read the books and then connect with us, or connect with us and we'll get going faster.
Okay, that's great. Allan, thanks so much for coming on the podcast. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me, Richard.
Thank you for listening to the Good Question Podcast. Please email support@thegoodquestionpodcast.com if you have any referrals to great guests for us to interview. Visit thegoodquestionpodcast.com to hear more interviews. And please help us spread the word by rating and reviewing us on Apple Podcasts, iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you listen to this podcast.